There you go, Jennifer. We've got you on Inception Cam.
All right. So today is, of course, Martin Luther King Day. And so read an article earlier today written by Fabiola Cielos for Vox. And so I had five fast facts pulled that I was going to kind of talk about that article, but I wrote something a little different instead because something in that article she wrote actually really resonated with me. And she writes, quote, "This year, those seeking to uphold the hate and bigotry that King vehemently fought against will surely try their hand at rewriting King's story once again, calling for peace and unity in the wake of a riot that sought to overthrow democracy and roll back justice. And America has to see it for what it is, an attack that King would have unequivocally denounced." And so I was perusing social media today, looking at, the ways in which King's words were appropriated by various people on social media, from leaders to just common people posting on social media. And from everything I've seen today, she's right. So I think on this day, it's important not to just reflect on King's legacy, but also for us to acknowledge that King lost his life as a result of white supremacy. The same white supremacy the nation was founded upon, the same white supremacy that justified native dispossession and chattel slavery, the same white supremacy that, when threatened, has historically reacted with physical, verbal, and legislative violence, and the same white supremacy that led to the insurrection at the Capitol last week, and that continues to be a cancer within our society. So King railed against white supremacy, he called out racism, capitalism, and rallied and empowered Black people. And while all the praise for King and his legacy that comes from people in positions of power in the context of unity makes many people feel good, for others it seems disingenuous. At the time of his assassination, King, like many other Black activists during the civil rights era, was not well liked. Black activists fighting for equality were often harassed, condemned as dangerous by government agencies, and seen as a direct threat to white supremacy. This whitewashing of King's legacy, an example of imperialist nostalgia. As anthropologist Renato Rosado explains, imperialist nostalgia revolves around a paradox. A person kills someone and then mourns the victim. Or in a larger context, imperial subjects, and yes, the US is imperial, deliberately alters a form of life and the regrets that things have not remained as they were prior to that intervention. So in conclusion, the paradox here is white supremacy. On one hand, it mourns King, even though it is responsible for his death, while simultaneously lamenting the loss of Jim Crow segregation and slavery, which manifests itself in the ugly right-wing extremist terrorist organizations we see today. Both are dangerous, but as King wrote in his 1963 letters from a Birmingham jail, it is not the radical white terrorist he found most dangerous, but rather the, quote, white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season, end quote. So, on that note, I think it's time for white supremacy in all of its forms to be held accountable. So rather than parsing a quote from King and posting it on social media to make yourself or someone else feel better, learn about the longer history of white supremacy in the nation, read the hard truths about the lived realities of slavery, racial oppression and violence, and educate yourself about what King and others fought for and what Black, Indigenous people, and people of color are still fighting for today. Then it might make more sense as to why something as common sense as equal rights for all, regardless of skin color, has yet to be achieved. And here's a big spoiler alert, it's because white supremacy never intended for it to be.
Yes. Wonderful research there, Jennifer, and really appreciate it. And it is like so many other Black movements, and where white people are, they get very performative. I had a phone call today from someone in the business community going, we're starting an initiative in 2021 and about inclusion and diversity. This isn't at a company, it's at something bigger than that. And we have a lot of companies we're working with, and like what they're doing is like, oh, we hired a Black person, or we put a Black person on our board of directors, or right, and they're like, but nothing's changed. It's like, well, no kidding, nothing's changed. So they actually contacted me looking for advice and resources. which is a good sign. But Jennifer, we saw this during after George Floyd died, right? Oh, the hashtag
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. I'm gonna make my Instagram
Mhm.
black for the day, right? And all
Yeah.
this stuff feels really good. Where the hell are all those people now? Because
Yeah.
they're certainly not in the streets anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good sign that people are acknowledging that. But again, it's back to that whole, kind of his understanding of the danger of moderate white people who are like, yeah, we agree with you, but does it have to be right now? So, I mean, and activism takes multiple forms. People can write, they can do art, they can do music, they can go out in the streets. There are many ways to be an activist and an ally, but sitting behind your keyboard and posting a hashtag on social media isn't it.
And on the subject of taking things out of context, we have a clip from
Mm-hmm.
1966 where Dr. Martin Luther King talks about this really misused and misquoted statement he makes about rioting and peaceful protest.
Mm-hmm.
It is a tremendous clip, and I'd love to roll it.
Yes.
60 Minutes, rewind.
Now, what I'm saying is this. I would like for all of us to believe in nonviolence, but I'm here to say tonight that if every Negro in the United States turns against nonviolence, I'm going to stand up as a lone voice and say this is the wrong way.
I will never change in my basic idea that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to the Negro in his struggle for freedom and justice. I think for the Negro to turn to violence would be both impractical and immoral.
There is an increasingly vocal minority who disagreed totally with your tactics, Dr. King.
There's no doubt about that. I will agree that there is a group in the Negro community advocating violence now. I happen to feel that this group represents a numerical minority. Surveys have revealed this. The vast majority of Negroes still feel that the best way to deal with the dilemma that we face in this country is through nonviolent resistance. And I don't think this vocal group will be able to make a real dent in the Negro community in terms of swaying 22 million Negroes to this particular point of view. And I contend that the cry of black power is at bottom a reaction to the reluctance of white power to make the kind of changes necessary to make justice a reality for the Negro. I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the economic plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years.
How many summers like this one do you imagine that we can expect?
Well, I would say this, we don't have long. The mood of the Negro community now is one of urgency, one of saying that we aren't going to wait, that we've got to have our freedom. We've waited too long. So that I would say that every summer we are going to have this kind of vigorous protest. My hope is that it will be nonviolent. I would hope that we can avoid riots because riots are self-defeating and socially destructive. I would hope that we can avoid riots, but that we will be as militant and as determined next summer and through the winter as we have been this summer. And I think the answer about how long it will take will depend on the federal government, on the city halls of our various cities, and on white America to a large extent. This is where we are at this point, and I think white America will determine how long it will be and which way we go in the future.
Even Senator Jacob Javits asked the question recently. He said that he was a slum resident, but he and some of his fellow Jews were able to make it out of the ghetto on the Lower East Side. The same thing is true with lots of Irish, Italians. And he asked the question why the Negro finds it so difficult to make his way up out of the ghetto.
Well, number one, no other racial group has been a slave on American soil. It's nice to say other people were down and they got up. They were not slaves on American soil. The other thing is that the Negro has had high visibility. And because of the prejudices existing in this country, his color has been against him. It's been against him, and they've used this to keep him from moving up. In the final analysis, when you say to a man that you are in this position because of your race or because of your color, you say to that man that he can never get out of it. Other racial groups have been able maybe to change the accent or change the names, but the Negro can't.
Powerful, powerful interview,
Yep.
Jennifer, and really puts in context his words about a riot being the voice, the language of the unheard.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And I think it's important to note too, and going back to that Vox article today, and maybe we can post a link somewhere. You know, there's this real tendency of people, especially people in positions of authority, to kind of parse, and white people too, to parse this particular passage from the I Have a Dream speech, where King is arguing that people should be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, as a way to advocate for colorblindness. When in fact, in that same speech, King clearly articulates how the construct of race shaped the lived experience of Black Americans in very negative ways. So I think it's all too often appropriated for a particular agenda. In this instance, to call for unity after, you know, we witnessed this very traumatic event that was really grounded in white supremacist ideology. I'd also think too about this kind of longer history of demonizing Black activists. I mean, if you look back right after World War II, when We Charge Genocide came out in 1951, and it was basically like a lot of Black people going, hey, you're over fighting for, you know, these people to be liberated while you're doing the same kinds of things to Black people within your own borders. And here's this UN definition of genocide, and here's all of the instances where that actually fits in our particular situation. And, you know, and they're being deemed as, you know, basically terrorists. And so, yeah, it's just, I think it's a lot of the stuff that comes out on MLK Day, remembering his legacy and that nostalgia, is just appropriated in very unfortunate ways to fit these very skewed agendas.
One of the things that is saddening for me in that interview is that's almost 54 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the message of it's really up to white America, it's really up to the federal government, it's really up at the local government to tear down. He doesn't use the words institutional racism, but that's really what it just comes down to. It's, you know, his message is we can protest all we want, we can do all these things, but at the end of the day, when we walk down the street, we can't change what we look like. We can't change our skin color, our facial features, our hair, and you know, look, I mean, the history of my name has changed multiple times. And the spelling of our last name is actually an error because they screwed it up when my family came in. There are lots of people in the United States that go by Smith or Johnson or whatever because they got rid of their Italian or Irish last name because those were racial minority once upon a time.
Yeah, my grandparents immigrated in from Italy at the time where you basically had to, if you wanted to come into America, you had to renounce your Italian citizenship. And so my mother still has the maiden name of Grandinetti. But yeah, it was a very different time. But, you know, and going back to like phenotypical features, it was a lot easier for certain populations to become accepted because they shared you know, similar skin color, could blend in or assimilate with white people. And that's not the instance for Black Americans and other people of color. And so they're just continuously fighting for an equality that white supremacy just has no intention of allowing. So the onus then falls on, you know, white people to call this shit out and dismantle it and ally and become, I guess, educators for other white people, because the onus for educating white people about racism shouldn't fall on people of color.
Exactly. Jennifer, thank you for that report. There was a Malcontent who, in the comments, said if we ever need any drone footage, let them know. Don't have a specific need today, but the best way to get in touch with us, tips, T-I-P-S, at malcontentment.com. Seriously, shoot us an email, tips at malcontentment.com, and someone on our team will grab it. On the subject of our team, something I've got to do a little plug for the cause. One of the easiest ways you can support us, follow, please follow us on Facebook. We're like jumping up and down right now. Follow us on Facebook. 10,000. It's not like, it's like, ooh, we're cloud chasers. We want 10,000. We can do a lot more because of the rules of Facebook if we have 10,000 followers, and we're getting closer. Please follow on Facebook. You can share, you can start a watch party, depending on the channels that you're on. Share watch party on Facebook. If you're on Twitter or Periscope, you can retweet, or on Periscope, you can tweet out and help amplify those Black voices. The other thing is, everybody here is paid with hearts. So if you appreciate our mods, if you appreciate independent media, spam those hearts. If you're on Twitter, Periscope, or Facebook. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, you could just go like, I love you mods, or put hearts. They really do love seeing that, and they make our jobs much, much easier. And with that, we're going to roll our first commercial.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest opened back up on Saturday with improved security. Jennifer, they had so many people there on Saturday. They just were basically like, we're staying open until we get everybody through the line. Come on down. And Cairo provided some coverage there and was showing how cars were literally just wrapped around the block down Highway 99.
I was super great to see them getting some extra love after the crap they went through. So I was very glad to see that.
Not on Martin Luther King Day weekend, no less. And by the way, Malcontents, let me remind you, Black Coffee was firebombed on October 1, and King County Sheriff, Shoreline Police Department, 0 arrests, 0 suspects, and sat on that security video for 3 months. Not that there's any institutional racism in the police. Definitely not.
No, not at all.
No.